We've come to northern Chile and the port city of Arica. Matthias Katsch from Germany is here for the first time. He's on a special mission. One of his former teachers, a priest, is said to live here. Katsch was abused by him as a child.
It's a bit of a remote location. I hadn't expected that.
Matthias Katsch was abused by 2 teachers while at the Canisius College, a Jesuit high school in Berlin. For legal reasons, we can only identify his abusers as Peter R. and Wolfgang S. Over a period of decades, the 2 priests abused many children. Their superiors ensured that everything was hushed up. In 2010, Matthias Katsch finally blew the whistle on the perpetrators. Since then, both men have been seen in Chile. He asks if any Germans are living here. A man points to a nearby street. With the investigation stalled, Matthias Katsch is taking matters into his own hands. Why does he feel he has to do this?
Who else is going to do it? The church is doing nothing, and I feel a certain sense of responsibility to warn people here.
Matthias Katsch's quest to track down his abusers began in January 2018 in Santiago de Chile. At the time, the city was full because Pope Francis was in town. While crowds celebrated the head of the Catholic Church, Matthias Katsch nursed his anger against the institution. Back in 2010, he was instrumental in uncovering abuse in Germany's Catholic Church by going public with what he had suffered. His actions empowered dozens more abuse survivors to come forward, but none of the cases was recent enough to prosecute the 2 priests. In 2015, the German broadcaster WDR reported on Peter R. for the first time. Its research showed that the priest had abused a female student in recent years in the Diocese of Hildesheim. In 2010, she reported the crime herself to the diocese, but the bishop in charge simply sent her home. He did not inform her family or report the case to the authorities. Peter R. escaped punishment. How could that happen? The day after that report was broadcast, Hildesheim bishops Heinz Gunther Bongartz and Norbert Treller gave a hastily scheduled press conference. It was Bongartz who had talked to the female student when she tried to report her case back in 2010. So why did he send her away?
After repeated questioning, she said very clearly that he had given her a kiss on the cheek and that during previous visits he had given her hugs, which she didn't like. It was very clear to me in this situation that what was being described to me was not a sexual assault. And therefore, I couldn't classify it as sexual abuse.
Und kann deshalb auch von mir nicht als sexueller Missbrauch eingestuft werden.
But by that time, it was already known that this priest was at the center of the abuse scandal at the Canisius College. Didn't it sound alarm bells for you, making you think there might be more to this?
Sound alarm bells? Signs of affection like a kiss on the cheek or that kind of greeting are pretty normal among young people today.
Before long, the government commissioner for the sexual abuse of children, Johannes Wilhelm Röhrig, took on the case. He called on the diocese to appoint an independent expert to thoroughly investigate the case of Peter R.
I have the impression that there is still a tendency to try to protect the institution by withholding information and not laying the facts on the table. And that is preventing transparency.
The diocese gave in, and in the fall of 2017, the report was published. By putting out a public appeal, the investigation uncovered dozens more victims of Peter R. from youth groups, a kindergarten, and even from faraway Chile. But the expert in charge of the investigation, Peter Moser, found all the cases had expired under the statute of limitations.
Judging by the pattern we see here, it's very probable that this is only the tip of the iceberg. We can see a pattern in the church of looking the other way and being unwilling to recognize the full scale of the problem.
I apologize with all my heart that I didn't recognize the perpetrator's strategies back then, and that I wasn't able to draw the right conclusions to protect the children.
Bishop Bongartz then tendered his resignation, but it was rejected by his superiors. So what next? Would he look for more victims of Peter R. himself? Would he look into the links with Chile or seek to find out what Peter R. was doing today? Months passed without any action. In the end, it was another who felt obligated to take up the cause, Matthias Katsch. He was shocked to hear of the abuse cases in Chile, and he had a good idea of where he might find them. The Fundación Cristo Vive is one of the largest charitable organizations in South America, with projects in Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. Matthias Katsch himself spent a year working here as a volunteer when he was 18. He's returned frequently and knows lots of people here. The Fundación Cristo Vive looks after children and provides them with an education. Many young people in Chile find it hard to get work or job training. Here they can find both. They can train as painters, bricklayers, or office administrators. But Matthias Katsch has come to see the woman behind it all. Sister Carolina. She's a German missionary who has spent 50 years working in Chile. She's won numerous awards for her work and has twice received the German Federal Cross of Merit. Over the past decade, 5 million euros in private donations alone have flowed from Germany to Sister Carolina and Cristo Vive. Matthias Katsch first met her in Berlin when he was a high school student at the Canisius Kolleg. Sister Carolina was 36 years old when she visited the school to appeal for support for her projects. Today, we know all too well what was going on at the school during this period. The priest, Peter R., was one of the teachers. He appears to have had few adult friends, choosing to surround himself mainly with young boys. He allowed them to call him by his first name and gave them gifts like record players or cameras. And he spent time outside work with them too. He and the children spent many hours in this outbuilding of the school, dubbed the castle. During his group exercises, the boys would struggle with their feelings. Afterwards, they would spend the night at the castle with the priest. He showed them pornographic magazines. Later, they would get typed questionnaires asking them how the photos had affected them. They had to go into his room one by one to discuss the results. He asked them about their dreams and urged them to masturbate while they're in his room. It was at this time that Sister Carolina came to Germany. She talked about her projects in faraway Chile. The boys were fascinated, Matthias Katsch included. She developed a friendship with Peter R., and he began supporting her and her foundation. He offered grants to enable young people from Chile to come to Germany and live at his house. Numerous young people from Sister Carolina's foundation spent time living with Peter R. in Germany. What does she think about that now, knowing what she does? And is there still a link between the priest and her organization?
I know Peter very well. He came to Chile to visit us one time. I could never have imagined that things like that could have happened to him. He certainly tried to be a good person through his efforts to help many, many people. I witnessed that myself. He even used his own pension to pay for a child to be able to study. Or for a young person, a man, a woman, people who just went to him with their needs.
I know from the time that I was at school that he would give gifts to the boys that he was after. So obviously when I hear that he's been trying to be generous here, that immediately arouses my suspicions that his generosity was all aimed at being able to pursue his own lusts.
I couldn't say that. None of the young people that I know, and I knew them all, none of them could say that they became a victim. Of all those who were there, from the north or south, some from Bolivia too, no one said anything. I don't know of a single one.
He's still sending money?
He sends money here, yes, for 2 or 3 young women that he got to know here and made an effort to help. He still sends money for them. I have to go.
Mein Lieber, das Herz schlägt. Das kannst du auch wissen.
My heart goes out to more and more of the people who have suffered most. That is our top priority.
Danke. That doesn't make sense to me, to be honest. This is exactly the problem. If you're too close to the perpetrator, it's incredibly difficult to distance yourself from them and make a clean break, to come down entirely on the side of the victims.
It won't be his last conversation with Sister Carolina. But first, he wants to find the people who went from here to stay with Peter R. in Germany. 2 of them were mentioned in the report on the Hildesheim diocese. From now on, Matthias Katsch wants us to film with a hidden camera. In an outlying district of Santiago, he begins to ask around.
Hola. Hola.
So what exactly did Peter R. do after leaving Canisius Kolleg? He was forced to leave the school in 1981 after his students wrote a complaint. They said his youth work was merely a facade and that in reality he was trying to control and influence their sexuality. But instead of going to the police, his superiors in the church simply transferred him. First to the city of Göttingen. They informed no one there about what he'd been doing. And so once again, Peter R. was working with children. He abused a 9-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 14-year-old. The church dealt with the matter internally and transferred him again, this time to Hildesheim. It was now 1989. Here, Peter R. was appointed priest at a local church where he helped provide meals to the needy. It was during this time that he began inviting young people from Chile to stay with him. A number of girls spent several months at his house, helping with household duties. In 1993, one mother from Hildesheim reported that she believed the priest was harassing them. She said the girls had told her he kept touching their breasts. Finally, 4 years later, Peter R. was transferred to Wolfsburg. 2 years after that, he was moved from there to Hanover. Since 2003, he's been retired and living in Berlin. Matthias Katsch is hoping to speak to some of the women from Chile who stayed with Peter R. One young woman agrees to meet him. She's a new contact. Her name was not mentioned in the German investigation. She spent a whole year living with Peter R. in Hanover. Her sister also stayed with him in Hildesheim. She is mentioned in the Hildesheim report, but no one's been in contact with her. The family is part of Sister Carolina's parish.
When I was 12 or 13, he came to Chile to visit Carolina, and twice he took my sister to Carolina's house. She said he had touched her breasts. When he did it for a second time, I witnessed it myself. I remember how worried my sister was about visiting him in Germany. She didn't want to go.
So when you went to Germany, was your sister worried?
Yes, she didn't want me to go to Hanover because she knew I'd be alone with him. But I decided to go because I wanted to learn the language. I didn't want to stay with him, but I wanted to learn. Right from the start, he took away the key to my room. So I pushed the sofa in front of the door, but I was still afraid because I was alone and I knew what he was like. Then he rented an apartment in Berlin. I didn't like going there because I had to sleep in the same room as him. One time I woke up in the night and heard him making strange sounds in his bed. He was masturbating. I didn't want to go back to Berlin after that. And when I did, I put chairs and my suitcase around my bed so that I would hear him if he approached me in the night.
Today, the priest is 77 and still living in that Berlin apartment. It was there that he abused the young girl from Hildesheim, who reported her case to church authorities in 2010. That was the year the general public in Germany heard about Peter R. because Matthias Katsch and more than 40 other former Canisius students went public. The church responded, saying all the cases had expired under the statute of limitations. And it neglected to mention the young woman who had reported her case that same year. Nevertheless, the abuse scandal made international news and reached Chile, too.
Suddenly, Peter was in the newspaper, and I read that he had abused many children. I told my brothers and sisters about it, although not my parents, as they knew nothing of what had happened. And then right at that time, when the news came out, he suddenly turned up here at our house. He didn't tell my parents anything about the scandal. He just said he'd come for a holiday. Then my brothers and sisters came, and we demanded a meeting with Carolina to force him to leave my house and to tell my parents what was happening. He just said the media reports all kinds of things and acted like he'd done nothing wrong at all. And Sister Carolina defended him. Then my brother told him to leave our house.
So Sister Carolina took him with her, but he's kept calling you since.
When was the last time?
Christmas.
Last Christmas.
Yes. I keep telling myself he should pay with a life sentence for what he's done. No one should suffer the way people suffered under him. He should be sent to prison to pay. He knows what he's done. What I don't understand is that he talked about God and being a Catholic, but then did such evil things. Now he needs to pay. It's time.
At the end, the young woman shows us a photo of her with good friends of Peter R. in Hildesheim. Because no one stopped the priest, the young girl next to her was also abused by him. That was the student who reported her case to the Hildesheim bishops in 2010.
I have to fight back tears the whole time. It was the right thing to do. What I did was right. It's painful to talk about it, but there comes a point when you have to lay everything out on the table, and then it's enough. You don't need to focus on it from morning till night. But you just need to have it all out once and say, this is what happened, he's responsible, and they looked the other way, or cooperated, or later covered it up. And then you can slowly start to close the box and say, that's it. And then you can get on with your life.
Und dann kann man weiterleben.
During our previous conversation, Sister Carolina claimed she knew nothing of any abuse cases in Chile. Now we've heard a different story. Evidently, Sister Carolina even took the priest into her home in 2010 at the height of the abuse scandal. So what's the truth?
If they had said anything that our daughters had problems, I would have confronted Peter and sent him home.
But you didn't do that in 2010. You didn't send him home.
I couldn't because I didn't know anything. They said nothing.
But you knew from the press.
Not from the girls.
But in general.
From the press. But I can't condemn someone based on accusations in the press. I knew Peter liked to have hugs and kisses, and gave out kisses himself, which was a bit unusual. But a kiss here, a kiss there. I can't tell you anything. I didn't see anything or know anything.
Could there be more abuse survivors who haven't said anything?
When I asked various ones, I got no answer. It's possible. There are some young women who, if someone touches them in the wrong way, they give them a slap, and that's it. If they touch their breast, or they try to kiss them. But of course, sometimes it's problematic, because sometimes the person can start to cooperate and go along with it. But then later they think, he crossed a boundary. And then they start to feel partly guilty, that they let it happen, that they allowed the other person to do what he did.
I understand the two girls had a terrible time in Germany.
Yes, but isn't that partly their own responsibility? Shouldn't one sister warn the other and say, don't do it? It was terrible for me?
So it's the family's responsibility?
Of course it's the family's responsibility. How are outsiders supposed to know? And then the man pays for your studies afterward, and you carry on accepting the money? Maybe they were afraid because Peter paid the money through us. They basically got their money here at the office. And that's probably doubly difficult, that you accuse the man who is at the same time sending you money. As soon as I get the chance, I will talk to the two of them, and I won't come with any accusations. I'll just say how sorry I am that they didn't have enough trust to say something back then. It would have helped me a great deal if they had said something. Maybe I could have helped Peter. I really think I could have done. If I'd have known, I could have intervened.
Couldn't you have helped the girls too?
Yes, of course, as far as you can help. What's done is done. I wouldn't know how to help the families afterward. I really wouldn't.
Does this worry you?
No, but it hurts me that they didn't trust me enough to say anything. Because this was a gift they could have given me, to trust me. They knew me. Nevertheless, in life we live forward, and we want to include others and to move on. And it would really be my desire for the two of them that they can get free of this, really. And I'm ready to talk to them with all the love that I'm capable of, with God's help. That's my hope for both of them, that we would be able to talk.
She wants to believe, and I can understand that her colleagues and friends are innocent of these things. And so she'd rather focus on and believe everything that appears to speak for them than to just believe the simple statements of the victims. So she relativizes, plays down, seeks excuses or explanations. Obviously, it's a bitter experience for me, but it's nothing new. In fact, it's a recurring pattern. And obviously, I now have my doubts as regards the safety of the children and young people here today. I hope very much that this bitter realization, which is bitter also for all the friends of Sister Carolina and her work, that it will provoke a response that says, how can we prevent this kind of suffering from occurring again in the institutions and initiatives of this foundation? And how can we distance ourselves clearly from these perpetrators and the past?
The abusive priest Peter R. had access to children and young people for more than 40 years. He was unwilling to speak to us on camera. But back in 2015, he did agree to be interviewed at his Berlin apartment. He said he only asked the Canisius students to masturbate in his room so that he wouldn't have to report them to the school director. As for the girls, he said he never gave them anything more than a kiss on the cheek. From his point of view, he is no criminal. Meanwhile, Matthias Katsch's mission is not over yet. Now he's arrived in Arica in northern Chile. Peter R. has been here before too. He visited the other implicated priest from Germany, Wolfgang S. He's said to be living in Arica today. The two of them first met as high school students in the 1950s. Then, in the 70s, they worked as teachers at the Berlin Canisius Kolleg. It was here that they met Sister Carolina. But there's something else that Peter R. and Wolfgang S. have in common. A large group of former students say they were abused by both teachers while at the Canisius Kolleg. And Matthias Katsch is one of them. Wolfgang S. stripped the children naked and beat them for hours. After his deeds came to light, he too was transferred, first of all to Hamburg, then to the St. Blasian Jesuit High School in southwest Germany. He underwent therapy and spent his summer vacation in Chile. After abusing children at his new school too, he was transferred at his own request to the Church of Santa Cruz in Arica. That was in 1985. In 1991, Wolfgang S. applied to leave the priesthood and confessed his crimes to the church. He spoke of terrible beating orgies. He added that he had more opportunities to commit abuse in Chile than ever. As for the church, his superiors kept everything to themselves. They didn't warn anyone in Chile about him. The church kept silent about all the crimes, for which the statute of limitations had not yet expired. Wolfgang S. later listed them all himself. Wolfgang S. continued to work for the Catholic Kolping Association in Chile until he retired in 2009. He also set up a sports club in Arica called Trotamundos, or Globetrotters. Trotamundos is one of the most successful sports clubs in Chile. Athletes from here have even made it to the Olympics. Guido Núñez is now the coach at the club. He heard about the 2010 scandal surrounding Wolfgang S. in Germany. So how does the coach see the club founder today?
In Germany, there were accusations against him. But all I can say is the only thing he left behind here in Arica was a great sense of gratitude. There are many people here who to this day continue to speak about him with affection. Nothing like that happened at the Trotamundos Club. He didn't do anything like that. And we didn't see anything else. He worked, and that was it. My question is, if these documents exist and all these accusations, why isn't he in prison?
But Matthias Katsch speaks with a woman on the phone who has a very different view.
Hallo, habla Matthias.
She met both Wolfgang S and Peter R at Trotamundos. They were known as Padre Wolfi and Padre Pedro. She went to stay with Peter R in Hildesheim. But is she willing to talk to Matthias Katsch about it?
Ja, perfecto. A las 6.
And?
6 o'clock. Here. That's good, very good.
By evening, our contact had changed her mind. She didn't want to speak in a public place, but rather at home in her own apartment. She, too, has heard nothing from Hildesheim. She's received no compensation or offer of counseling.
Can you tell us how you got to know the two of them, Pedro and Wolfi?
When I was little, I went to Trotamundos together with my family because it was linked to the church.
Then
Wolfi came to visit us, and we really trusted him. We felt very privileged to be close to a priest. We got to know Pedro while he was here on holiday. He offered my sister and me the opportunity to come to Germany for learning purposes. He felt that we were intelligent somehow, and that we could achieve more and have greater opportunities.
And had you experienced anything with Wolfi at that time?
There was a very disturbing situation with my sister. First, he lifted up her skirt, and then he hit her more than once, on her, and she felt terrible. She says she's never been able to wear a skirt again to this day. Smacking was something he always did to the boys at the club, not the girls. That was very rare.
How come you've never spoken about this in all these years?
Because it's shameful.
But there was something else she struggled with too. In Hildesheim, there were appeals for donations to Sister Carolina and Cristo Vive. Peter R. used photos of his young guests from Chile to raise funds for the foundation.
It was terrible to see the photos of myself wearing dirty, ragged things. Because it obviously provoked an emotional response, causing people to want to help. And that's tough for a child. It wasn't the Pedro we knew from Chile, where we thought, he's helping us out with his own means, voluntarily.
You said that when you first got to know Pedro, something happened that should never have happened.
There was something that immediately bothered me, and that was his hugs. He would hug me under the arms, and he'd put his hands on my breasts.
Has this affected your life?
Yes. When I sense that someone is attracted to me sexually, I just freeze completely. It's like something that's beyond my control. My body feels immovable, and I seem to go into a state of shock. It's really difficult to get psychological help here in Chile. It's complicated because it's very expensive.
Your name was mentioned in the Hildesheim report along with a number of others. But to this day, no one's tried to contact you as part of the investigation?
que aparecen ahí en esta investigación.
We're Latinos. We're South Americans. What does it matter if it's one child more or less from here? When I heard about it, I thought, of course, the others are German children. People are more likely to listen to them. The ones from here are maybe not so important. Here it's the parents' responsibility. They're the ones who sent us there.
And then suddenly, an earthquake puts an end to our conversation.
Earthquake.
Matthias Katsch is not yet finished in Arica. He now knows that both his former teachers were responsible for bringing young people from here to Germany. But what he doesn't yet know for sure is whether Wolfgang S, who is now 73 years old, is still living here today, and if so, what he's doing. He goes to the Santa Cruz church, where the former Jesuit priest used to be in charge. He wants to meet with his successor and warn him.
He wants to speak to me alone.
The two of them talk for 3 hours. Matthias Katsch tells the priest about his own experience and how Wolfgang S used to strip him naked and beat him for hours. He talks about his other classmates and how the scandal came out in 2010. He speaks about the abuse survivors here in Arica, too. The priest said he had no idea of the scale of the problem. He says he'll appeal for others in his parish to come forward with what they know. And he gives Matthias Katsch Wolfgang S.'s current address.
It seems to be the case here in Arica that everyone who heard about the abuse scandal in 2010 really believes it was just slander and that nothing actually happened. Just some bad people in Germany who came up with an idea to harm their Padre Wolfi, and so they just dismissed it. But they say he's still here and still in contact with the church members that are involved in the running club. Overall, though, he's said to live quite a secluded life. He no longer makes public appearances in the way that he used to when he first showed up here.
Have you thought about going to see him?
Yes, I've thought about it. But to be honest, I don't want that kind of confrontation. The whole thing would take a psychological turn. Other people always want that kind of thing, some kind of reconciliation or whatever, but that's not me. I don't think that's important. We talk far too much about the perpetrators and not enough about the victims.
In September 2018, the German Bishops' Conference published a new study on child abuse in the Catholic Church in Germany. It found at least 3,600 children fell victim to abuse between 1946 and 2014. Cardinal Reinhard Marx apologized to those who suffered abuse.
I feel ashamed when I see how so many just looked the other way, who didn't want to accept what was happening and played it down, who didn't want to see or hear, and I include myself in that. We didn't listen enough to the victims. All this cannot remain without consequences. Those who have suffered have a right to justice.
The Vatican itself has since held its first summit aimed at tackling the global problem of sexual abuse by Catholic clergy. But what about the Diocese of Hildesheim? Auxiliary Bishop Heinz Günther Bongartz wasn't willing to speak on camera. He wrote to us that despite what he called intensive research by the Vatican Embassy in Chile, it had not been possible to make contact with any abuse survivors there. But he said the Hildesheim cases would be included in an internal church tribunal looking into the case against Peter R. The maximum punishment would be dismissal from the priesthood. Our time in Chile is coming to an end. It's our final evening in Arica. Matthias Katsch has managed to find the young women named in the Hildesheim report. And by talking to their sisters, he's identified 2 more previously unknown victims of Peter R. He will now pass on their names to the Hildesheim diocese in the hope that they can receive compensation and professional help. It felt like the mission was over. But then, early the next morning, Matthias Katsch had a change of heart about visiting Wolfgang S.
That's 64, 66, the red one, and then... This must be it. Oh, it's empty. We're looking for a German man.
His house is back there.
I don't really need to go there. I've seen it now. I know where it is, and that's enough. I just wanted to know where he is, and that's okay. It's not about him. Good. I feel good. Not relieved exactly, but lighter than before. Yes.
After Matthias Katsch left, we tried to speak to Wolfgang S. ourselves, but he didn't answer the door.